Good morning, Connect family. It's great to see you all virtually. Thank you for the opportunity for me to share a little bit of my heart with you this morning. And do you know what? I have really missed sharing my life with you guys this past year. You know, from our casual interactions, grabbing a coffee through the hatch whilst I'm running through to the toilets with Arlo, chasing him with a potty. Everything from that reassuring, prayerful hand on my shoulder to a hug of solidarity. I have really missed sharing my life with you guys every Sunday and all the bits in between. So hopefully this is an opportunity for me to give you a bit of a hopeful spin on your year that will just propel you into this season ahead. So I started the year 2021, we're still here, listening to a podcast recommended to me by my good friend Jessica Richards, thanks, of an interview with the author Charlie Mackesy, who wrote the best-selling book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. Some of you may be very familiar with it. And it brought me back to the story that I'd read back in March of 2020. And it led me to the audiobook that I listened to one afternoon whilst cleaning the bathroom. Time is very precious and short in my life, that any free time I have, I can never just be doing one thing. So I was cleaning the bathroom, listening to the podcast, writing an email. And I was just so captured by this book and the simple truths that lay within it. There are just also some very biblical truths, I think, that are laid out in a way that really captures society's mind just at that perfect point in history last year, as I know that many of us read this book during that first lockdown when we were plunged back there in March 2020. And I think what I've really enjoyed from this period in history has been the simplicity of life that we have returned to. And I've greatly appreciated the opportunity to cut out all the noise and that normally entangles our lives and to really pinpoint what really matters. So I think what I want to share with you is more of a testimony, sharing a piece of my life, which is what I've missed being able to do so closely with you all over the past year. And in the book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, I was struck by a few quotes that I would like to share with you now. The first one is, "What do you think success is?" asked the boy. "To love," said the mole. "Life is difficult, but you are loved." "I've realised why we're here," whispered the boy. "For cake?" asked the mole. "To love," said the boy. "And to be loved," said the horse. And whilst these quotes are all lovely and actually rather whimsical in a way, there is something beautiful, some simplified truth in them. And reading these quotes is like the instant satisfaction of eating a lovely slice of cake that Mole loves so much and is really soothing to the soul. And there is another of Charlie Mackesy's illustrations that he made for Comic Relief and that was printed on t-shirts that says, "Love wins." And then this reminded me of the controversial book by Rob Bell, which was published about 10 years ago now, which was also called Love Wins. And I'm not going to go into the theology of that book, but the truth in the title captured me again. Love wins. And there's something of the context of that book by Rob Bell that I found interesting this year as I was faced again with heaven on my doorstep. And I wanted to share a little bit about how love has won in my life this year and where there are areas where I could not see the goodness. I'm claiming victory for an eternal hope. And I think there's been no doubt that this past year has been one of the most challenging for us as a local community, as a global community, and on a personal level, I have never known such a time of deep tragedy in my family life. And I've really tried hard to weave the inspiration of this talk through a different filter. But my experiences this past year are so powerfully lodged at the forefront of my mind that I can't see beyond it. And so for those of you who have experienced grief, you'll know that it can be very dominating. And I find that I'm looking at most things and most aspects of my daily life through this lens. So if anything, I hope that you can find some connection in my story, and maybe I can find some comfort by sharing it. Help us all along the way. So for those of you who may not have been aware of what we've been through in the past year, I should probably fill you in. So my sister, Susanna, was 35 years old when she was diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer back in May 2020. She was living and working in the city of Lausanne, which is in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, with her Dutch husband Bobby and their then 3-year-old daughter Malou. Susanna was an otherwise healthy individual with no previous health conditions or anything that lay in her past that could have predicted her future. Due to the aggressive and very rare mutation of her particular strain of cancer, she was given a less than 10% chance of being cured and was told that they would have to manage this disease as a chronic illness, extending her life for as long as possible through intense rounds of regular chemo and surgery to remove tumours where possible. So the news of her condition and her prognosis hit our family like a train. It was truly the most shocking and sudden news that I have ever heard, and I think I am still now in disbelief at how this could have happened. Susanna underwent life-changing surgery and began an intensive course of chemo that, while unpleasant, gave her a summer of grace, where she was able to enjoy the beautiful Swiss countryside, and we were able to visit her for 10 days in August. But one question loomed very heavily in my heart, and it's a dead-end question really, about God's goodness. And if God is good and he desires all things to work together for our good, why was this situation that we faced with my sister so devastatingly bad? And I think we can never know the answer to all the whys that we had, but what I could eventually cling on to was the simple truth that God himself is good. Despite the bad situation we found ourselves in, and that his unfailing love is pursuing us all the days of our lives. My sister Susanna passed away peacefully on the 10th of November 2020 in an astonishingly beautiful hospice set in the mountains overlooking the banks of the Lake of Geneva. And God's grace over our family was so evident at that time. And it was the bit at the end where heaven touched earth that fascinated me, and I think will continue to fascinate me. It's the moment when a father comes to take his daughter home, and the beautiful completion of the perfect circle that is life. And I was also there when my mother died. That was 10 years previously. And as I watched heaven come to earth and Jesus call her home, it was a beautiful experience, tinged with human sadness and loss, but an overriding sense that love wins was evident. And I think experiences that bring us to the edge of life always provoke questions about what we found or achieved along the journey. And I think really what it all boils down to is love. God's great love for us and his desire to have us in close relationship with him. Like the boy in our story and his simple but beautiful revelation about why we are here. To love, said the boy, and to be loved, said the horse. And it really is that simple, nothing more. And there was a sense in my sister's passing that she was being called home, back to the place where it all began, completing that perfect circle. And I had the privilege of watching her journey there so gracefully and so carefully. And I'm such a future thinker. Like, the ultimate future, the final destination is heaven. There's really no further future beyond heaven. And I think that's why it has continually captured my imagination and inspired my thinking. I just love the mystery of it, the otherworldly aspect of heaven that exists beyond time, beyond place or dimension. And it offers an unending source of inspiration for my creative mind to just wander around in. And I think the vastness of this mystery and all the questions that the idea of heaven provokes points to the extensive capacity of God and his love for us, keeping us in this unending cycle of awe and wonder. And I realised that the only way out of my circular why questions that kept revolving in my mind was to claim God's goodness in my sister's life and for the generations that followed her and her children. It was like putting a stake in the ground, as if to put an obstacle in the way of all of those why revolutions that were really leading us nowhere. And it was that song, The Blessing, that resonated so strongly for us in the beginning of our lockdown life in 2020 as we digested Susanna's diagnosis. And it was those words that I prayed over her life at the end, claiming God's victory in her family and for generations to come. And it says, may his favour be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. And I think that there is just something so powerful in that declaration that allows love to win in your own heart and for a generational seed to be sown. And where we cannot see the goodness in the difficult situations that we face, standing strong on the promise that God is good and that his goodness will follow us and that love will win out. You know, love always wins, but there is something about claiming God's victory and goodness in your difficult situation that feels really powerful. It's like an active testimony. It's like setting things in motion. Kind of like a war cry, almost, if you like. And we may never see the outworking of this proclamation in ways that we might imagine with our earthly eyes, but with a heavenly perspective, we trust that his will be done. And as I prayed with Susanna for the final time, just 2 days before she died, I spoke these words over her life, over the life of her daughter Malou, and I claimed victory in a situation where I could see no earthly goodness. And that was Psalm 23 verse 6. And it says, surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. I think that love is a choice, and choosing goodness is a victory that we can claim, knowing that love will always win. Love has to win. Jesus is the eternal victor, and by choosing this in our lives and claiming his goodness in situations that we feel are far from good, I believe has a heavenly consequence. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. Whether we see it now or in 10 years, or even if we will never see it until we get to see it from heaven's vantage point. we know that love will always win. And I think through this whole year, I have time and time again seen God's love, care and grace and mercy in evidence. Whether it be the well-timed flight, that perfectly orchestrated meeting with friends, the insane beauty of that lake that we sat beside in Switzerland. I have felt wrapped in God's pure and simple love for us. Even in those darkest moments, I've seen God's hand reach out to us, and I know that love wins, always and forever. Whether I see it now or later, victory is His in whatever your circumstance. So I will leave you with this prayer. It's kind of like a quote actually from Rob Bell's book at the very end. And I just want to let it wash over you as I close. And it says, may you experience this vast, expansive, infinite, indestructible love that has been yours all along. May you discover that this love is as wide as the sky and as small as the cracks in your heart that no one knows about. And may you know deep in your bones that love wins.